Most men today believe they are prisoners of their own minds, and they are right, but not for the reasons they think. They wake up each morning carrying the weight of thoughts they never chose, worrying about things that have not happened, replaying conversations that are long over, building entire realities out of fear and assumption. They tell themselves this is normal, that everyone thinks this way, that negative thoughts are just part of being human. And in believing this lie, they surrender the one power that could set them free, the power to choose what occupies their mental space. I have spent decades studying human behavior, observing what separates those who build meaningful lives from those who merely survive their days. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by what you allow to happen inside your mind. Negative thinking is not a personality trait. It is not your natural state. It is not something you inherit, like eye color or height. It is a learned pattern, a mental habit so deeply ingrained that most people mistake it for reality itself. They believe their negative thoughts are accurate assessments of the world, when in truth they are nothing more than echoes of past pain, reflections of unexamined fears, and the residue of a culture that profits from keeping you anxious and uncertain. I learned this the hard way. There was a time in my life when I too was a hostage to negativity, when every setback felt like evidence of my inadequacy, when every criticism confirmed what I secretly believed about myself. I would lie awake at night, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios, rehearsing failures that had not yet occurred, torturing myself with thoughts that served no purpose other than to drain my energy and dim my spirit. I was not living, I was defending, constantly bracing for the next blow, always prepared for disappointment. And the tragic irony was that my negative thinking did not protect me from pain, it created most of it. The modern world has become a breeding ground for negative thinking. You are bombarded daily with messages designed to make you feel insufficient, inadequate, behind. Social media shows you everyone's highlight reel while you compare it to your behind-the-scenes struggle. The news feeds you an endless stream of crisis and catastrophe, training your mind to expect danger around every corner. Your workplace rewards you for finding problems rather than solutions, for identifying risks rather than opportunities. Even your closest relationships can become echo chambers of complaint and worry, where negativity is mistaken for realism and optimism is dismissed as naivety. This is the enemy we face, not just the negative thoughts themselves, but an entire system that normalizes them, that treats anxiety as wisdom and pessimism as intelligence, and the cost of living this way is staggering. Negative thinking robs you of energy, creativity, connection. It keeps you small when you could be expanding, silent when you should be speaking, still when you need to be moving. It turns every opportunity into a threat, every new beginning into a potential failure, every relationship into a source of anxiety. It does not keep you safe, it keeps you paralyzed. But here is what most people do not understand about negative thinking. It is not something that happens to you, it is something you do to yourself. Every negative thought is a choice, even when it feels automatic. Every worry is an act of imagination directed toward outcomes you do not want. Every moment spent dwelling on the past or fearing the future is a moment stolen from the only time you actually have power, right now. And once you truly grasp this, once you understand that you are not the victim of your thoughts, but the creator of them, everything changes. Let me be clear about what I am not saying. I am not suggesting you deny reality or pretend problems do not exist. I am not advocating for toxic positivity or delusional optimism. Life contains genuine difficulty, real loss, legitimate pain, but there is a profound difference between acknowledging a problem and dwelling in negativity, between facing a challenge and drowning in worry, between processing difficult emotions and making a home in suffering. The first empowers you to respond. The second ensures you remain reactive. The first honors your intelligence. The second insults it. Negative thinking is a habit, and like all habits, it operates below the level of conscious awareness until you bring it into the light. Most people have no idea how often their minds default to negativity because they have never stopped to observe their own thinking patterns. They move through life on autopilot, allowing their minds to run wild with assumptions, judgments, catastrophic predictions, and self-criticism, never questioning whether any of it is true or useful. And this unconsciousness is precisely what keeps the pattern alive. The first and most essential step in freeing yourself from negative thinking is to become aware of it. This sounds simple, but it requires a level of honesty that most people find uncomfortable. You must catch yourself in the act of negative thinking. Notice the moment when your mind begins spinning its familiar stories of doom and inadequacy. You must observe your thoughts without judgment, without immediately believing them, without defending them. This is not easy because your negative thoughts often feel like facts. They arise with such certainty, such emotional force, that questioning them seems almost absurd. But watch what happens when you do question them. Take any negative thought and ask yourself, is this actually true, or is this a story I am telling myself? Is there evidence for this belief, or am I operating on assumption and fear? What would I tell a friend who came to me with this same thought? And suddenly you create space between yourself and your thinking, a gap where choice becomes possible. You realize that you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that observes them, and in that realization lies your freedom. I remember working with a man years ago who was convinced he was a failure. Every conversation circled back to this core belief. He would list his mistakes, his missed opportunities, the ways he had disappointed himself and others, and when I asked him to define success, to show me the standard against which he was measuring himself, he could not do it. His sense of failure was not based on any objective reality. It was based on an impossible standard he had absorbed from his father, his peers, the culture around him. Once he saw this, once he recognized that his negative self-assessment was not truth but conditioning, he began to change. This is the pattern with most negative thinking. It is not rooted in present reality, but in past programming. You learn to think negatively from people who thought negatively, from experiences that taught you the world was unsafe, from a society that conditions you to focus on what is wrong rather than what is possible. And because this learning happened early and often, it feels like truth. But feelings are not facts and thoughts are not destiny. The second crucial understanding is that your mind will always find evidence for whatever you believe. If you believe you are inadequate, your mind will highlight every moment that confirms this and ignore every moment that contradicts it. If you believe people are untrustworthy, you will see betrayal everywhere and miss the countless acts of kindness surrounding you. If you believe life is hard and unfair, you will interpret every challenge as proof of this worldview. This is not because life is actually this way, but because your mind is a meaning-making machine that seeks to validate its existing beliefs. This is why negative thinking is so dangerous. It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your negative thoughts shape your perception. Your perception shapes your behavior shapes your results, and your results confirm your negative thoughts. The cycle perpetuates itself, growing stronger with each repetition, until you are completely convinced that your negativity is simply realism, that you are just seeing things as they are. But what if you interrupted this cycle? What if instead of automatically believing your negative thoughts, you examined them with the same skepticism you would apply to a stranger's unsolicited advice? What if you consciously chose to direct your attention toward possibility rather than catastrophe, toward what you can control rather than what you cannot, toward the next right action rather than all the ways things could go wrong? This is not about lying to yourself or ignoring reality. This is about reclaiming authority over your own mind. Because here is what I have learned after decades of studying human psychology and behavior. Your thoughts are not commands, they are suggestions. And you have the power to accept or reject any suggestion your mind offers. This power exists in every moment, but most people never exercise it because they do not realize they have it. Let me tell you what happens when you begin to consciously direct your thinking. At first it feels unnatural, even false. Your negative patterns are so familiar that anything else seems like you are pretending. Your mind will resist, throwing up thought after thought designed to pull you back into familiar territory. This is normal. Your brain is wired for efficiency and it prefers familiar neural pathways even when those pathways lead to suffering. Change requires you to forge new pathways, and this takes conscious effort, repeated practice, patience with yourself. But if you persist, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice that most of your negative thoughts are repetitive, that you have been thinking the same anxious thoughts for years, recycling the same worries, rehearsing the same fears. And in seeing this repetition, you recognize how much mental energy you have been wasting, how much of your life you have spent in a prison of your own creation. This recognition is painful, but it is also liberating, because it means you can choose differently starting right now. The practice is simple but not easy. Every time you catch yourself in negative thinking, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of here? What am I trying to protect myself from? Is this thought helping me or hurting me? Is it moving me toward what I want, or keeping me stuck in what I do not want? And then, consciously choose a different thought, not a false one, but a useful one. Instead of dwelling on everything that could go wrong, consider what you can do right now. Instead of replaying past mistakes, extract the lesson and release the rest. Instead of comparing yourself to others, focus on your own progress, however small. This is not positive thinking. This is disciplined thinking. This is taking responsibility for the content of your consciousness. And I promise you, this practice will change your life more profoundly than any external success ever could, because it changes the lens through which you experience everything. One of the most powerful realizations you can have is this: most of what you worry about never happens, and most of what does happen is something you never worried about. Think about this. How many hours have you spent anxious about outcomes that never materialized? How much energy have you invested in preparing for disasters that never came? And when real challenges did arise, how often did all that worry actually help you handle them? The answer is almost never. Worry does not prevent bad things from happening, it just prevents you from fully living while you wait for them to happen. I am not suggesting you become reckless or stop planning for the future. I am suggesting you distinguish between productive problem-solving and destructive rumination. Problem-solving asks, what can I do about this, then does it. Rumination asks, what if this terrible thing happens, then spirals into anxiety without producing any useful action. One is empowering, the other is exhausting. One respects your time and energy, the other squanders both. The same principle applies to negative self-talk, those running commentaries of self-criticism that so many people mistake for motivation or honesty. You would never speak to someone you care about the way you speak to yourself in your own mind. You would never say to a friend, "You are worthless, you always fail, you are not good enough, nobody really likes you." You would recognize such statements as cruel and destructive, yet you say these things to yourself constantly and somehow believe this is acceptable, even necessary. It is neither. Negative self-talk does not make you better, it makes you bitter. It does not motivate you to improve, it paralyzes you with shame. It does not prepare you for reality, it distorts your perception of it. And every moment you spend tearing yourself down is a moment you could have spent building yourself up, not with empty affirmations, but with genuine acknowledgement of your efforts, your growth, your inherent worth as a human being. Here is what changed my life, and what I have seen change the lives of countless others. I stopped asking myself whether my thoughts were positive or negative, and started asking whether they were useful. Does this thought serve my growth or my stagnation? Does it move me toward my goals or keep me trapped in fear? Does it expand my possibilities or limit them? Does it honor the person I am becoming or chain me to the person I used to be? And when a thought fails this test, I do not fight it. I simply redirect my attention elsewhere, the way you might redirect your gaze from something you do not wish to see. This redirection becomes easier with practice. Your attention is like a muscle. It strengthens with use. At first, pulling your mind away from negative patterns feels like dragging a stubborn animal, but over time, with consistent effort, your mind learns to default to more constructive thinking. Not because you are denying reality, but because you have trained yourself to focus on what you can actually do about reality, rather than simply suffering over it. And here is the crucial truth that most people miss. Your thoughts create your emotional state. Your emotional state influences your behavior, and your behavior determines your results. If your thoughts are consistently negative, you will feel discouraged, anxious, defeated. When you feel this way, you will behave accordingly, avoiding risks, playing small, giving up easily. And when you behave this way, you will produce results that confirm your negative thoughts. The cycle is complete, and you are trapped. But the reverse is also true. When you discipline your thinking, when you consciously direct your attention toward possibility and action, your emotional state shifts. You feel more capable, more energized, more willing to try. This emotional shift changes your behavior. You take risks, you persist through difficulty, you engage fully with life. And these behaviors produce better results, which reinforce your constructive thinking. This is not magic. This is mechanics. This is how the human mind actually works when you understand it and use it intentionally. Let me address something that often comes up when I talk about this. People say to me, "But Dale, you do not understand. My situation is genuinely difficult. My problems are real. I am not just making this up." And I always respond the same way. I never said your problems were not real. I said your negative thinking about them does not help you solve them. There is a vast difference between acknowledging a difficult reality and drowning in negative thoughts about it. One leads to action, the other leads to despair. I have known people who faced extraordinary hardship with grace and resilience, and I have known people who crumbled under minor inconvenience. The difference was never the circumstances, it was always the interpretation of those circumstances, the meaning they assigned to them, the thoughts they chose to think about them. This does not minimize anyone's pain or struggle. It simply acknowledges that you have more power than you realize to determine how that struggle affects you. Another common objection is that positive thinking is unrealistic, that the world is genuinely difficult and dangerous, that bad things happen to good people, that optimism is a form of denial. And again, I am not advocating for denial or delusion. I am advocating for accuracy. Most negative thinking is not accurate. It is catastrophic, exaggerated, distorted by fear and past trauma. When you learn to observe your thoughts objectively, you often discover they are far more negative than reality warrants. Yes, life contains difficulty. Yes, loss and pain are inevitable. Yes, bad things happen. But life also contains beauty, connection, growth, meaning, possibility. Both are true simultaneously. The question is, where do you habitually direct your attention? Because wherever you focus, you will find more of. Focus on what is wrong, and the world appears hostile and hopeless. Focus on what you can influence and improve, and the world opens up with opportunity. This is not about forcing yourself to feel happy when you are sad, or pretending everything is fine when it is not. This is about not making difficult situations worse with unnecessary mental torture. This is about conserving your energy for what actually matters, instead of burning it up in worry and rumination. This is about being a good steward of your own consciousness. I want you to understand something fundamental about the human mind. It does not distinguish between real and imagined threats. When you worry about something that might happen, your body responds as if it is happening right now. Your stress, hormones surge, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense. This happens whether the threat is real or completely imagined. So every minute you spend in negative thinking, you are subjecting yourself to the physiological effects of stress, wearing down your body and mind, all for something that may never occur. This is not sustainable. You cannot live this way and expect to thrive, or even to function well. The constant state of mental and emotional agitation that negative thinking creates is exhausting. It depletes your energy, clouds your judgment, damages your health, strains your relationships, and robs you of any joy or peace you might otherwise experience. And for what? What are you actually gaining from all this negativity? Most people, when they really examine this question, realize they are gaining nothing. They believed their negative thinking was protecting them, preparing them, keeping them safe, but it was doing none of these things. It was simply stealing their lives one worried thought at a time. So what is the alternative? How do you actually stop thinking negatively? The answer is both simple and profound. You do not stop thinking negatively by fighting your negative thoughts. You stop thinking negatively by replacing those thoughts with something else, by consciously choosing what you will think about instead. Your mind needs something to focus on. It cannot simply go blank. So you must feed it constructive, useful, purposeful thoughts. This begins with gratitude, not as a platitude, but as a practice. Every day, deliberately direct your attention to what is working in your life, what you appreciate, what you have rather than what you lack. This is not about ignoring problems. It is about maintaining perspective. Even in the most difficult circumstances, there are things worth appreciating. Your health, even if imperfect. Your relationships, even if complicated. Your abilities, even if limited. The fact that you are alive and capable of growth and change. Gratitude rewires your brain. It creates new neural pathways that make it easier to see the good alongside the bad, the possible alongside the problematic. It does not eliminate challenges, but it prevents challenges from consuming your entire mental landscape, and this shift in perspective changes everything. The second practice is purposeful thinking. Instead of allowing your mind to wander into worry and rumination, give it specific, constructive tasks. Think about your goals and the next action you can take toward them. Think about people you care about and how you might add value to their lives. Think about skills you want to develop, books you want to read, experiences you want to have. Fill your mental space with intentional thoughts, and there will be less room for the negative ones to take hold. The third practice is what I call the redirecting question. When you catch yourself in negative thinking, instead of trying to force it away, ask yourself, what do I want to be true instead? If you are worrying about failure, ask yourself, what would success look like? And what is one thing I can do today to move toward it? If you are dwelling on a past mistake, ask yourself, what did I learn from this, and how will I apply that lesson moving forward? If you are anxious about what someone thinks of you, ask yourself, am I living according to my values, and if so, does their opinion actually matter? These questions shift your focus from the problem to the solution, from the past or future to the present moment, from what you cannot control to what you can. They do not deny reality. They change your relationship to it. And this change in relationship is where your power lies. I have watched this transformation happen countless times. People who were trapped in cycles of negative thinking, who believed they would always be anxious, always be self-critical, always be worried, and then they learned these practices. They started paying attention to their thoughts. They started questioning their assumptions. They started deliberately directing their attention. And slowly, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly, they changed. Not because their circumstances changed, but because they changed how they related to their circumstances. One of my students once said to me, I feel like I have been living in a dark room my entire life, and you just showed me there was a light switch on the wall all along. This is exactly right. The capacity to choose your thoughts, to direct your attention, to discipline your mind has always been available to you. You simply did not know it was there, or you did not believe you could actually use it. But you can, and the moment you begin to do so, everything shifts. Now, I need to be honest with you about something. This work is not easy, especially at first. Your negative thinking patterns have momentum. They have been strengthening for years, possibly decades. They will not disappear overnight. There will be days when you feel like you are making no progress. Days when the old patterns reassert themselves with overwhelming force. Days when you wonder if any of this is worth the effort. On those days, I want you to remember this. Every thought you think is either strengthening an old pattern or building a new one. Every time you catch yourself in negativity and choose differently, you are weakening the old pattern and strengthening your capacity for conscious choice. Every single time, even when it feels pointless, even when the old pattern returns minutes later, even when you have to redirect yourself 100 times in a single day, each redirection matters. Each one is a victory. Each one is proof that you are not helpless, that you are not at the mercy of your conditioning, that you are capable of change. And over time, with consistent practice, you will notice something remarkable. The negative thoughts will still arise because you are human, and your brain has been conditioned to scan for threats and problems. But they will lose their power over you. You will notice them without becoming them. You will observe them without believing them. You will acknowledge them, and then choose to think something else, something more useful. something more aligned with who you are becoming and what you are building. This is freedom, not the absence of negative thoughts, but the ability to choose how you respond to them. Not the elimination of difficulty, but the development of resilience. Not the creation of a perfect life, but the cultivation of a disciplined mind that can handle whatever life presents. And I promise you this, when you master your thinking, when you take responsibility for the content of your consciousness, when you stop being a passive victim of mental habits you did not choose, your entire life will transform. Not because external circumstances magically improve, though they often do, but because you will have developed the inner resources to create the life you actually want, regardless of circumstances. You will stop wasting energy on worry and rumination, and you will have that energy available for creativity, connection, action. You will stop interpreting every setback as evidence of your inadequacy, and you will start seeing setbacks as feedback, as information, as opportunities to learn and adjust. You will stop comparing yourself to others and measuring your worth by external standards, and you will start living according to your own values and building toward your own vision of a meaningful life. This is not theory, this is not wishful thinking. This is the result I have seen in my own life and in the lives of thousands of people I have worked with over the years. The ones who commit to this practice, who do the daily work of observing and redirecting their thoughts, who refuse to be victims of their own minds, they change. Their relationships improve because they are no longer projecting their negativity onto others. Their work improves because they are no longer paralyzed by fear and self-doubt. Their health improves because they are no longer subjecting themselves to constant stress. Their sense of peace and purpose deepens because they are finally living from intention rather than reaction. But this transformation requires a decision. A real decision, not a wish or a hope or a someday plan, but a commitment right now to take responsibility for your mental and emotional life. It requires you to stop blaming your circumstances, your past, other people for the quality of your thinking. It requires you to accept that your mind is your domain, and what happens there is ultimately your responsibility. This may sound harsh, but it is actually liberating, because if you are responsible, you also have power. If your negative thinking is just something that happens to you, you are helpless. But if it is a pattern you have learned, it is also a pattern you can unlearn. If it is a habit you have developed, it is a habit you can change. This is not easy news, but it is empowering news. So here is what I'm asking you to do. Starting today, pay attention to your thoughts. Not all day, every day, that would be overwhelming, but set aside a few moments throughout your day to simply observe what is happening in your mind. Notice when you slip into negativity. Notice the specific thoughts, the familiar patterns, the emotional triggers. Do this without judgment. Just observe, like a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. And then, once or twice a day, practice redirecting. When you catch yourself in negative thinking, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself if this thought is useful, if it serves you, if it moves you toward what you want. And if it does not, choose a different thought. Not necessarily a positive one, just a more useful one. What can I do right now? What is one thing I am grateful for? What is my next right action? These simple questions can shift your entire state in seconds. Do this consistently for 30 days, and I guarantee you will notice a difference. Not a complete transformation, but a noticeable shift. Less anxiety, more energy, better mood, clearer thinking. And this shift will motivate you to continue because you will have experienced firsthand that you are not powerless over your own mind. From there, the practice becomes a way of life. Not a burden, but a gift you give yourself every day. The gift of choosing what occupies your consciousness, what shapes your experience, what determines the quality of your life. Because that is what this is really about. Not positive thinking or negative thinking, but conscious thinking. Taking the controls of your own mind and steering it intentionally rather than letting it run on autopilot toward fear and worry and self-criticism. I have lived both ways. I know what it feels like to be trapped in negative thinking, to believe your anxious thoughts are just reality, to wake up each day feeling defeated before you even begin. And I know what it feels like to take control, to discipline your mind, to direct your attention toward what matters. The difference is not subtle, it is the difference between existing and living, between surviving and thriving, between being a victim of your conditioning and being an architect of your life. You have this power. You have always had it. The question is whether you will use it, whether you will do the uncomfortable work of observing your thoughts, questioning your assumptions, redirecting your attention, whether you will take responsibility for your mental and emotional life instead of blaming external circumstances, whether you will commit to becoming the master of your own mind. This is not about perfection. You will have bad days, difficult moments, times when the old patterns overwhelm you. That is part of being human. But even on those days, even in those moments, you still have choice. You can still pause, breathe, redirect. You can still remember that you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that observes them, and that awareness has power. Your life is waiting for you on the other side of this decision. A life with less anxiety and more peace. Less worry and more action. Less self-criticism and more self-respect. Less time wasted in mental prisons and more time invested in what truly matters. This life is available to you right now, not someday when circumstances change, but today in this moment, through the simple but profound act of choosing what you will think about. I leave you with this. The quality of your life will never exceed the quality of your thinking. If your thoughts are consistently negative, your life will feel negative, regardless of external success. But if you learn to discipline your mind, to consciously direct your attention, to take responsibility for the content of your consciousness, there is no limit to what you can create, no challenge you cannot face, no circumstance that can rob you of your inner peace. This is the work that matters most, not the external achievements, not the material success, not the approval of others, but the cultivation of a mind that serves you rather than enslaves you, a mind that empowers you to create the life you want rather than imprisoning you in the life you fear. Choose your thoughts, direct your attention, take responsibility for your mind. This is how you stop thinking negatively. This is how you change your life. And this is how you finally become free.